Good morning. Welcome everyone. I'm Councillor Chris Atwell, Chair of the Planning Committee. Limited public seating has been made available. However, this meeting is also being webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. The public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Assemble by Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed and everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including those people making deputations today. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they do not wish to be recorded. Please, can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when you have finished, otherwise the camera will remain on you. If there is any voting, please can members keep their hands raised clearly until the number of votes have been stated. Okay, let's make some introductions. If we start with members, thank you.
Councillor Judith Smythe, St Jude Ward.
Good morning, Judith.
Councillor Mary Vallely, Cosham and Wimmering.
Good morning, Mary, welcome.
Good morning, Chair. John Smith, Eastern Craneswater Ward.
Good morning, John, nice to see you.
Raymond Hent, Copner Ward.
Thank you, good morning, William.
Peter Candlish, Eastern Craneswater.
And good morning, Peter, welcome. And if I could ask our officers to introduce themselves.
Good morning, my name's Kieran Laven. I'm one of the Council's planning solicitors.
Good morning, Kieran.
Morning, Chair. Edward Chapman-Selton, Planning Officer, Case Officer for item 4 on the agenda, the North Portsea Island Phase 5.
Good morning, thank you, Edward.
Morning, Simon Turner, Planning Officer.
Morning, Simon.
Alison Harper from Democratic Services.
And thank you, Alison. And if I can ask those people who are intending to give deputations just to introduce themselves. Shall we start with you, Simon?
I'm Simon Hill and I'm deputising on 29 Shadwell Road.
Thank you, good morning.
Hi, my name is Nikki Reid. I'm the planner working for Coastal Partners, here for agenda item 4.
Thank you, good morning.
Good morning, Carrie-Anne Wells, agent for Applecore, deputising for 2 of the items on the agenda today.
Thank you, good morning.
Good morning, my name is Pavan Brambat, deputising for number 2, stroke number 4, North End Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Bart, welcome. Okay, members, declarations of interests on any of today's items. Okay, minutes of, apologies. Councillor Shah, I think is going to be a little late. And Councillor Vernon Jackson is on his way, but is obviously going to be a few moments late. Any other apologies anyone has from anybody? No? Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting, pages 5 to 16 of the pack. Are they a true representation of the previous meeting? Do I have a proposer?
Shall propose.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Candlish. Thank you. Okay, well, let's move on to today's substantive business. Agenda item 4, which is about sea defences. Edward, over to you.
Right. Do we have this slide on the screen? Good. Okay, so as described, this is, I won't read out the full description, but this is North Portsea Island Phase 5. Which is the missing link, if you like. Members will recall that there have been sea defence works going along the north of Portsea Island for a while and up the Eastern Road side. So this fits in between Portsbridge, apologies, I have a stinking cold, so if I'm a bit difficult to hear, I apologise. So this fits in between Portsbridge roundabout in the west and the railway bridge in the east, and is a scheme to improve the sea defences along the south side of Ports Creek, the north shore of Portsea Island. This slide shows some photographs of the situation at the moment with a concrete seawall, the railway bridge, and looking along Ports Creek itself. The application site area enclosed by the red line encompasses an area of some 25.6 hectares, is larger than the sea defence works themselves, which are confined to an area north of the moat, but includes includes the area needed for the works compounds and access to those works compounds, and also allows the applicant to carry out some improvement works to the conservation area and the scheduled monument that is Hilsea Lines. As I said before, this is the final phase in the scheme and fills the gap between the completed defences along Tipner Lake and those at Anchorage Park to the east. This is an aerial photograph with the red line superimposed on it and shows the 3 works compounds that are needed for these works. Compound 1 just to the east of Perrone Road, Compound 2 in the Portsbridge car park, and Compound 3 accessed off Altrop Drive, Anchorage Park. This slide shows the extent of the flooding situation if the sea defences weren't improved. The different colour shadings represent the blue is flood zone 3, the red is residential area, and the yellow are commercial areas. And this shows the extent of a 1 in 100 year event with the current situation. This slide shows some photographs of some actual storm events during the winter of 2013-14, where you can see the defences being breached and how close it is to the railway line. And then again, this shows the extent of the existing seawall, and difficult to see. I'll come on into the next slide. You can see that the quality of the existing defences, a lot of it is made up of literally oil drums filled with concrete and set in to form a wall, built in the 1930s, I believe. Other bits comprise just sandbags filled with cement, concrete, and the bottom left slide shows how dilapidated some of it is becoming, notwithstanding the fact that it's also is not sufficiently high enough to cope with a 1 in 100 year flood event based on current climate change predictions. So this slide shows the extent of the seawall. Apologies if it's not that clear. And a typical cross-section in the middle. It's going to be, the new defence is basically a sloping revetment, raising the crest height to 4.1 metres above ordnance datum compared to the existing height of 2.7 metres above ordnance datum. That's an increase in height of 1.4 metres and designed to be some 20 centimetres, I beg your pardon, higher than a predicted 1 in 200 year flood event. Typical cross sections, 2 types of embankment, type A and type B. This is type A and that is type B. Both, you'll notice both have rock revetments stretching down to below the bed level of the creek, and then above mean high water springs, I believe it's going to be a grassed embankment with a cycle stroke footpath along the top to encourage and improve public access to that well-used part of the city. This is a typical sketch section of what the new sea defence will look like. So rock revetment to the creek edge, a grass embankment at a 1 in 3 gradient, and then with a reinforced grass footway, cycleway on top, and where it exists at the moment, existing footpaths along the landward side of the seawall. As I'm sure you will recognise from previous Coastal Partners schemes, the drawings they have to submit with their planning application are incredibly detailed and don't reproduce in a presentation such as this very well. So they have kindly supplied me with some CGIs of the scheme, just to give you an idea of what it will look like on completion. So this, these move in a easterly direction from the Portsbridge car park. So this is where the red dot is. This is meant to show what it's looked like on completion at Portsbridge. Sorry? Sorry, again, very difficult to see, but okay. I don't have a point. Do I have a pointer?
Yeah.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Right. I agree. That's better with the lights dim. So the red dot is there. So that shows the location of where that CGI is created from. And then, as I say, we move across incrementally to the west, to the east rather. So that's again the red dot there. We've moved a few meters along, showing a typical and these move, as I say, and then this is the area around the Perone Bridge area at the moment. Will be enhanced with outdoor seating and so on. Again, moving along. These should be fairly self-explanatory, but please do ask me any questions later. There you see the railway bridge in the distance. This is moving to that point there. And again, showing improved public access to footpaths at higher and lower level. Improved protection of the moat. I have included the landscaping plans, but I propose to whiz through these fairly quickly. I'll come on to the SMAT note in a minute. The applicant has also kindly supplied us with some photographs of works at the Anchorage Park end of the scheme, which this scheme will be identical to in terms of the finished product, in terms of the revetment and the embankment and so on. So this shows Anchorage Park just after it was completed, but prior to the landscaping. And these photographs show how it is now with landscaping installed, blending into the surrounding area. So that ends the presentation. If we could have the lights back up again. Thank you. The SMAT note in front of you contains a number of corrections and clarifications, which are hopefully fairly self-explanatory. Paragraph 7.9, don't know where that 4.848 came from. It just should read extending below bed level. 7.12, non-return valves rather than non-return values. The consultation response from the Conservation Officer was, I apologise, slightly ambiguous. He's actually supporting the application, subject to some further work needed to determine the extent of some thinning of the tree cover there, so that, because English Heritage have requested that the Hilsey Lines scheduled monument is more openly visible. That is covered off, as you will see in the draft conditions that we'll come on to in a moment. 10.4 is just a clarification of which part of the EIA regs these works fall within. Paragraph 10.3 is a clarification that the relevant habitat regulations assessment has been produced and that the council adopts it, being the competent authority. 10.41, it should be the management and maintenance plan for coastal defence works vantage points rather than for the lines. And then, since the publication of the agenda, the agenda item which you will see will only included condition headings, I have been working with Coastal Partners, and we have agreed the wording of certainly of the pre-commencement conditions as required by the legislation, and the draft conditions are set out in full for you in Appendix 1 on the SMAT from page 8 to page 13, and include, as you would expect, the usual raft of conditions requiring details to be submitted in terms of construction environmental management plans, construction environmental transport plans, construction traffic management plans, landscaping scheme, public realm materials, biodiversity mitigation and enhancement, heritage mitigation strategy, archaeology mitigation strategy, drainage, and a heritage benefits and interpretation statement. And of course, without prejudice to your discussion and debate on this item, those could be called back to committee should you wish to see them and scrutinise them in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Members. Oh, deputation. Deputation from Nicola Reid on behalf of Coastal Partners. Over to you, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Myself and my colleagues from Coastal Partners were very pleased to have this application for Phase 5 of the North Portsea Coastal Scheme come before members of the Planning Committee. Just a little bit of background, what we call the PICS, it's a lot easier to say as an acronym, the Portsea Island Coastal Strategy Study, approved back in 2011, essentially split up Portsea Island into 7 discrete flood cells. So this is when tidal water comes in, it's basically doesn't escape outside of each of those cells. Flood cell 4, which is the North Portsea Island flood cell, was identified back then, along with the one for Southsea, as being a real priority, with works being required urgently. This is largely because of the low-lying nature of the land, but also, as Edward said in his report, the condition of the existing defences and the predicted effects of climate change. So for this flood cell in particular, there is a considerable and immediate flood risk to the area. Some of the assets at risk include 2 arterial road access routes, the only rail route onto Portsea Island, 2 scheduled monuments, along with other heritage assets, 89 electrical substations. There are historic landfill sites, obviously with the potential to cause localised pollution in the event of sort of erosion, and 17 educational facilities. In terms of properties, it was identified that with the present day risk of flooding, nearly 2,000 homes are at risk and 160 commercial premises. If we then take into account climate change and predicted sea level rise, these numbers really ramp up to over 4,000 homes and 490 commercial premises. The full scheme, the North Portsea Island Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Scheme, or FCERM, there's a lot of acronyms in the work we do, has been split into 6 separate phases, and this was for the purposes of consenting and construction. The main reason for this is because it's such a large scheme, so it covers nearly 8.5 kilometres of coastline, and this extends right round from the southern end of Titmer Lake on the west, all the way around the north coast down to Milton Common on the east side of the island. Phase 1, Anchorage Park, which Edward showed photos of, was the first phase, so that was completed. Phase 2, which is Great Saltons Quay and Milton Common, completed. Phase 3, Titna Lake, and Phase 4A, which is the section near Kendall's Wharf, all completed. We are currently constructing Phase 4B, obviously a break for the overwind period, and that's due for completion at the end of 2024. This is the final phase of the whole scheme. You'll see that it's Phase 5 and not Phase 6. That's because we've got a 4A and a 4B, so not to confuse anyone. And as Edward said, this really fills the final gap. So it links up to Phase 3 on the west and Phase 1 Anchorage Park to the east. And so this particular section, the current assets are really nearing the end of their life. There's sort of less than 5 years left. And the 2011 study, it was sort of predicted 5 to 10 years. Obviously, we've come on quite a long way since then. So what we're going to do is we're proposing to design for a 1 in a 500-year standard of protection for the next 100 years. This is the highest level of protection in the UK, outside inner London. As with each phase, we've looked at the most appropriate and effective form of flood defence, taking into account public opinion, for which we did a large amount of public engagement, existing site restrictions, and then key constraints such as ecology and heritage. And as Edward said, this phase continues the earthbound sort of embankment design used Anchorage Park. And this was the approach preferred by the public. They really felt they wanted something with a sort of natural feel that can retain the existing vegetation. So when constructed, this will provide an improved and continuous coastal path along all 6 phases of the scheme, stretching all the way down from Titna to Milton Common, really encouraging active travel. As with all our coastal partner schemes, we really try and include as many public realm improvements as possible. So for this one, there'll be a very substantial landscaping scheme on completion. We're also doing things like heritage mitigation, improved interpretation, ecological improvements. Prior to submitting this supply application, we undertook quite a significant amount of pre-app discussions, both external and internal, with the sort of teams within Portsmouth, and we're very pleased that it can come before members today without any objections from any of those consultees. We did also undertake quite a lot of public engagement as part of the wider scheme, and we're also very pleased that we've had no formal objections from residents as well, which is great news. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much for your time. We very much hope that you feel able to approve today in line with the case officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Members, questions on the application? Councillor Smythe.
Just one question. I think the question is about the railway crossing and the difficulties there I had anticipated that would be with leaving the railway at that level because it itself is quite low. I wondered if I don't see anything in here that's describing those issues or indeed proposing anything about the railway. Is it something you can update us on, please?
Councillor, thank you for your question. If I may, I'll delegate that to the Coastal Partners team, if I may.
Hello, my name's Caroline Timler. I work for Coastal Partners with Nikki. I'd just like to take that one. So the railway bridge, it does create a weir where floodwater can come over because it's slightly lower than our sea defences. So it's a plus 3.5 metres AOD, and our sea defences will be 4.6 with a design height of 4.3 because we allow for some settlement. So there's a little bit of a gap there. So we've done some modelling on it, and up to 2045, there will be regular inundation of the railway line, and they will have issues actually operating the lines at that point of a 1 in 200 year event. A 1 in 500 year event, which we're designing for, would be 2032, so a bit quicker than that. And we've been discussing with Network Rail on this, and they're very aware that they need to replace their bridge. So up to 2045, they won't be able to operate their bridge, so they must do something to protect it. Up to that period, the moats behind will be able to take that flood water because it's quite a limited area of it coming over. So they'll be able to cope with that, and there's an outfall when the tide goes down, because it's just a limited amount of time that the tide is high, because it's tidal. It will not flood the properties. Up to 2064, this may be a bit too much water coming over, so there could be a risk there. So the Environment Agency are aware of this, Portsmouth City Council and Network Rail are all aware of this, and the fact that the Network Rail need to replace their bridge to keep a railway line on the island, because it's the only one, by 2045, and the risk to us is by 2064, it's an acceptable risk. So we're working with Network Rail to work with them, either putting flood protection across their line, or they need to rebuild their bridge. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
2045 isn't all that far in the future, is it? Councillor Smith.
Chair, I had a very similar question actually. It was about, I noted what the Network Rail had said, and there was 7.12 about the drainage. I was, similar thing about the height of the bridge and what was going to be, and the time, given the fact that it's so important, line into the city, to London and everything else, what was going to happen. So thank you for that comment. I noticed in comment 7.12 that it says there may need to be some additional drainage. Given the importance of it, could I have a bit more clarity on that really, about there might be some need for some drainage to stop, to prevent water pouring onto the pooling on the railway line. Can we have a little bit more detail on that?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, you'll see draft condition 13 is that no development shall take place until a detailed drainage strategy has been submitted. So that will be coming back at some point with further details on that.
Have you had a read of condition 13? Ms. Matt? Yeah, on the appendix. Okay. Members, comments? It's an important skill.
Just for the record, I can't take part in this decision because I didn't arrive right at the beginning. So just for the record, I am not.
Thank you. Comments? It's an important application, and it's going to keep a lot of people safe from climate change. John.
I would just say, well, one comment first, which would be that we keep talking about this is the final gap, but we've still got the gap in the Tipner bit that's still going to be there. I mean, I know it's a separate thing, but I mean, this is the final phase, but there's still going to be a gap in that side wall, but that's a separate thing. But we're talking about filling the final gap. We're not going to actually fill the final gap, but somebody might correct me. But anyway, on that one, I think it's a great scheme, really good quality scheme for the north of the city. I think it's going to link up. It's going to be a great enhancement, and the pictures show that. And I think it's it's going to follow on. And I think it'll be great to get that link up around the top of the city for lots of reasons, really, not least for keeping the sea out, but also enhancing the area as well. So I think it's a great scheme. Thank you.
Yes, and it was useful to have the CGIs, I think, for today. To see Councillor Candlish.
Chair, I was simply going to say that it looks a good scheme and something we need to get on with. We talk about wanting to keep moving Portsmouth forward. We've been doing all the work on the scheme at the south of the city. This is something I think that will not only make the city safer, but also improve the amenity and use of the area. There will be some disruption as it's done, but long term this is the right thing to do. And I would propose that we accept the recommendation.
Councillor Smythe.
Happy to second that.
Excellent. Okay, look, Members, unless there is anything else, we have a proposer and a seconder. Those in favour of moving the officer's recommendations, the conditions attached, please indicate.
Councillor Shah, you arrived late, so you can't vote, I'm afraid. In any case, that's 6 votes in favour. That's unanimous from the members we have eligible to vote.
Thank you, Kieran, and thank you for your deputation this morning. So, Councillors Burnham, Jackson and Shah, you're very welcome. Any declarations of interest for today's meeting?
No, just my apology for being late.
No, that's fine. All right, thank you very much. Okay, and thank you, Edward. Thank you for coming in. I know you're not feeling too great this morning. So we'll just take a moment to swap over. Okay, next agenda item, North End Avenue. Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at 4 North End Avenue for a change in use from a Class C3 dwelling house to an 8-bedroom, 8-person house in multiple occupation. We have deputations in due course. So North End Avenue is one of the roads that runs more or less east-west with its eastern end at London Road. You can see, so the property is just a stone's throw from London Road with the various amenities and public transport, and shops, etc. there. It's a pair of semi-detached houses. It's the the left-hand side of that pair. Residential street. There's an MOT garage opposite, but otherwise it's residential along the road. Attractive, sizable property in North Portsmouth with a front yard there with existing waste bins already there, showing that that can be accommodated for an HMO as well. Moving on straight away to the matter of principle, which is the mixed and balanced community question. Would this proposal result in a mixed and balanced community with respect to, that is defined in terms of the 10% policy threshold in the guidance, SPD guidance? If a proposal doesn't breach that 10% threshold, it's normally accepted that the HMO would not cause an imbalanced community. So as the diagram shows, there are no other HMOs in that 50-metre radius. If this one were approved, this application were approved, the figure would be 1.8%, therefore well within your policy guidance. There's another application at number 16 that was refused, currently at appeal, were both this one to be approved today and the appeal successful, allowed, Planning Commission granted, 3.7 would result. So again, there's no danger of reaching that 10% threshold. There are a lot of addresses in this stretch because of subdivisions and flats, particularly on London Road, but also on North End Avenue. But even without all of those, with no HMOs, the 10% is not endangered. So officers conclude a mixed and balanced community would remain if planning permission were granted. Moving on to the application site itself, there is a side passageway that appears to belong more to the neighbour, but we are informed that there is access rights for the application site down that pathway and into the back garden, for example, for easier cycle access. And indeed, they've shown the store to be at the back. You've seen a photograph of the property. Here it is in detail in terms of the internal layout. So reception rooms downstairs, a small lean-to at the back, and this is also a lean-to on the side that would come out. And there's a further lean-to not actually shown. It's a very lightweight canopy type structure. And then 3 principal bedrooms upstairs and a bathroom. Rough estimations of what it looks like. And then in terms of the proposed conversion, it will be extended at ground floor under prior approval, achieved separately, and then a roof extension to provide extra accommodation up there to provide 8 bedrooms. Difficult for you to see perhaps, but on the ground floor we have the first bedroom and an ensuite, a second bedroom and ensuite, a third bedroom in the middle here with its ensuite there, and at the rear the shared communal space, and then upstairs 3 bedrooms with ensuites, 1, 2 and 3, and in the roof the last 2 bedrooms numbering 8 with ensuite, both of them. With respect to overall disposition of rooms in the property, they appear of an appropriate layout and certainly size as well. All of the bedrooms exceeding 10 square metres, so the combined living space needs to be at least 22.5. It is 25.1, and they all appear to have reasonable outlook and light, so officers are satisfied that an appropriate standard of accommodation will be provided for future residents, and it certainly meets the numerical standards in the SPD. There are some objections from neighbours, 7, concerning various matters, parking, concern about windows on the side, and noise, cumulative impact. None of these matters are considered so different from the current occupation of the premises as to amount to a reason for refusal, so it is recommended for approval.
Thank you. Mr. Bart, welcome. You have 6 minutes to give your deputation.
Cheers, thank you. So my name is Pavan Brambat. I live at number 2 North End Avenue. I've lived there for the last 12 years, and in that last 12 years, I've noticed, obviously, there's been 5 other HMOs on the street, and then there is a solicitor's office right in front of our house, which has been converted into, I believe, 15 bed care home, and a shed garage which has been converted into an MOT centre, putting an enormous amount of pressure on the street parking. It is get to that level, to find a parking place after 5 p.m. is as good as winning a lottery, because sometimes you have to go around to different streets, or even streets nearby my son's school, which is about 15 minutes away, just to find a parking spot. By adding another 8 occupants into next door property, and if they have a visitor, we need to find whether there is a room to accommodate 10 parking space on that street, which I don't think is the case. So that's the outside of it. But also, because these are Victorian houses and quite old build, the party wall is quite thin, and you can almost hear the noise from the next door property. And with 8 occupants moving in, I fear the noise would be very transparent, and along with the HMOs, I'm not saying that they would, but they bring their own set of challenges, and some of them is door slamming and loud music and alcohol and drug-related sort of misuse, and issues with the pest and bin bags being left outside and so forth. So I think there is a challenge there as well. The garden has been, the new planning permission shows that the garden has been covered in a concrete structure. I think 3/4 of the garden is, they're building another room there, 2.5 metre long, which obviously takes away the current views, and it just reduces the sunlight in our garden as well. And it makes us feel like, we'll be surrounded with a concrete structure rather than the pleasant views. And then the final point I want to make is that this is not, I understand that there are currently obviously shortage of homes and housing in the area, but this is being done for a profit generation rather than just accommodating the needs of the housing. The gentleman who bought the property just as we came out of COVID, he bought it and it's been empty for the last 2.5 years, I believe. And initially the planning permission was for 2 2-bedroom flats conversion, which I have no objection against. But obviously the interest rates started to rise, and the only way they could make this thing work for their interest is by converting this property into a 8-bedroom HMO, so that they can cover their sort of repayments and make some extra profit on it. So that's one of my other reasons as well. But yeah, mainly it's the parking and all the challenges the HMO brings with them, really, that I'm opposing, because I literally share the same party wall, and I know because I've been living there for the last 12 years. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bart. Karen Wells.
I attend this meeting regularly and tell you the same thing. So at Apicore, we could not be more passionate about providing our clients with high-end, fully compliant, well-designed shared living spaces. I've seen lots of negative reviews recently on social media about HMO developers, and I wanted to reiterate to the committee today that we are architects first and foremost. We provide a drawings package for our clients, and if instructed, we offer our clients a fully managed project, so we have more control on choosing considerate builders and project manage the development. We can then manage the property once completed. But this is down to the individual client as to what level of service they choose. We do have a handful of our own developments which have been developed to the highest standard, with thought to the end tenant put into every detail. I wholeheartedly believe that the neighbours from all of these properties would be our biggest supporters due to the level of communication we have with them and the level at which the properties are managed once tenanted. All of the clients who instruct us directly at Apicore share our passion to be the best at what they do and provide great living spaces and properly managed HMOs. Whilst I appreciate HMOs can have a very negative perception in the community, the only way this is going to change is by positive engagement with residents and councillors, which Apicore try to do consistently. Whilst I appreciate there are developers in the city that do not always have the same ethos as myself, I do believe it's important to not apply the same negative perception to all developers, because there is a clear need in the city for high quality HMOs, which is shown by the ease at which these properties are let. We've designed many HMOs in Portsmouth and surrounding areas, and our designs have never been subject to refusal of a HMO licence. We ensure all of our designs are fully compliant with planning, building control and HMO licensing, and we work hard to ensure we stay at the forefront of any changes to legislation to ensure our client has the best possible experience with us and is left with a great design, shared living home to give tenants the best possible living experience. And with regard to 4 North End Avenue, the house will be finished to a high specification as our client is keen to offer tenants the high-end accommodation, and the property will be professionally managed, so any issues if they arise will be dealt with promptly. All bedrooms exceed the 10 square metres and range from 10.84 to a huge 17.75 square metres. The required communal area for 7 persons when all these bedrooms meet the 10 square metres is 22.5, and this property provides 25.1, which exceeds that requirement. All of the bedrooms also benefit from an additional ensuite. The property has side access, which will make cycle ownership easier for the tenants, and there will be secure cycle storage in the rear garden. To address a couple of the issues that the neighbours brought up, parking, just to give you an example of the last 2 HMOs fully finished and tenanted by Apicore, one of the houses has 3 cars and the other one has 2 cars, which wouldn't be dissimilar to a normal average family home in Portsmouth with 2 parents and maybe a working child. quite potentially could have 3 cars. The party wall, again, is upgraded and further insulated as part of the renovation, which will improve the noise the neighbour is currently experiencing. The old walls are generally not very insulated. Once we improve it to new building regulation standard, there is a great deal more protection for neighbours either side. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Members, questions? Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Thank you. As I understand the drawings, and the drawing is very small and very faint within the papers, and it wasn't clear from the presentation, Simon. It looked as if on the second floor they were going to have instead of having a dormer into the existing roof, it looked as if it was a flat projection coming up, so a dormer at both front and rear of the property. Is that right? Because I'm conscious that the committee, I wasn't here, but the committee turned down an application for a front dormer at our last meeting, and I would want to make sure that we're being consistent.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just show you the photograph of the property afresh, so we can be very clear about what it is. Now, there isn't a front roof slope, which immediately makes it different to the application we had last week, which was for a forward dormer. A forward dormer requires a roof slope, whereas requires planning permission, whereas an extension to the side of the roof may not. In this instance, it does not require consent. I didn't show you, to be fair, there's the existing roof, as you can see, running front to back, with the ridge running front to back, and they proposed the extension on the left west-hand side, which is there, and there it is. So it would pop up there, just slightly recessed from the front elevation, but because it's not projecting forward of the front of the building, it is permitted development.
So that's going to come straight up at the front of the building. It's recessed on that picture on the right. It's recessed by 2 inches, but it is a front dormer, which will substantially change the view of the street scene, won't it?
It is a side dormer, so it's permitted.
Well, it's side dormer, but at the front.
You would, of course, see it from the front because it is set just behind. By eye, it's 10 or 20 centimetres recessed from the front gable. Just a minor recess. It would be clad in a matching material to the roof. Anyone can say whether or not they think it's going to have an effect locally, whether you like it. You would be able to see it, of course, but it's permitted development, so we're unable to intervene in any assessment or decision on it. It is permitted development.
So if you build a gable on the front, you can then build a front dormer, and that's fine. We just need to go and talk to the previous applicant and tell him that's what he has to do.
Well, building a front dormer is the same thing. You're building ahead of the existing front roof slope, which would also require planning permission. In this instance, because it's not forward of the front roof slope, it doesn't require planning permission.
Okay. I think you've had your answer. Members, any other questions on this application? Okay, comments?
What, can I just, so my worry here is that we keep having applications for HMOs in these small area of streets. So Shadwell, O'Freer, North End Ave, etc. There's 5 or 6 of them, and every time residents tell us that there are large numbers of HMOs, and every time the official count that we've got says that's not the case. We have to rely on the official figures. But it's becoming, just this little area seems to be becoming a big problem, and I wonder whether we need to do some proactive work from the planning department to go and look to check to make sure the HMO count is correct, because we've got 2 applications from these roads today, and we've had them time and time again, and I just want to make sure that we can reassure residents that we're working with the correct data.
Thank you. What I think is happening, and there's no scientific analysis to my response, but what I think is happening that landlords are careful to make sure they're finding gaps, if you like. So with the 50-metre radius, you can work out whether or not there are other HMOs there and so on. And so I think we are seeing plenty of applications up in this area, a regular stream of them, and there'll come a point where those gaps are getting filled, and bit by bit, depending exactly which property you're talking about, the percentages will get closer to the 10%. So as we move in that direction, I think clearly they'll start to reach, inverted commas, capacity with respect to our policy, and it would then start to control, put a limit on it. That there is a limit now, but an application like this, for example, in this particular radius, you could have 2 or 3 HMOs and still be within the policy threshold. But there will come a point where, depending on where you are, that limit will be reached, and either applicants won't apply there because they know, or they'll apply and find out and presumably have the application refused, possibly under delegated powers that you wouldn't even see. So then with respect to the data, as you know, we have our data sources, licensing, council tax and planning history, and then we also rely on councillors and neighbours to tell us if they think there are other properties, and from time to time, if you've seen on previous applications, sometimes we said, oh, number 4 is this, or number 12 and so on, and we will check them out and double check. So that's that further layer of checking that we can do. So otherwise, though, we are confident that the data is good and reliable. Chairman, if I may, would it be helpful to go over some of the other points from Mr. Batt? Just as a courtesy as much as anything, Mr. Batt, thank you. So there may be other 5 HMOs in the street in which Mr. Batt referred to, but if they're outside the 50-metre radius, we draw a line somewhere in terms of the effect of that. Don't deny there may be other ones further away, but within this 50-metre radius, we've got that particular figure of none other currently, and 1 other application under appeal. With respect to parking, and this also ties in with the extensions that you mentioned at the rear and the effect on light and views and so on. A family may apply to extend their property or extend it under permitted development rights, like the roof, or they may choose to extend under permitted development rights at ground floor level at the rear. It's pretty common in houses up and down the country. Or they may need to require for prior approval, which is a slightly larger extension than permitted development. So that's not only as a consequence of HMOs. Plenty of family houses can do that. So if you bought this house because you have a family and you think, well, actually, I need more space, I want to buy this house, but I know I can extend it, or I'm confident I am. So that could happen with a larger family in terms of numbers of people and therefore noise through the party wall and so on. And indeed parking, if your family happens to own 2 cars, 2 parents perhaps, or partners, and or you may have children who are old enough to drive. So we don't distinguish usually a particularly material difference in the parking, which I wouldn't dispute, I'm sure is chock-a-block already. With respect to the party wall and noise, as the applicant's agent has mentioned, the building regulations are to a modern standard as opposed to the building that's 120 or more years old, say, which will have thinner walls. So the modern standard will be applied to the extension and building here, which should actually improve things in its attenuation. You mentioned drink and drug taking. We can't affiliate that with an HMO use any more than we would to a family use. And lastly, the point about profit is simply not a planning consideration. We look at the other planning matters which we've addressed in this report and today. Thank you, Chairman.
Members' comments?
So I think this is a difficult one. Looking at all the applications we have today, this one has by far the smallest communal area of any of them. The others are reasonably generous, but this is very mean. And I think I have a concern about that. It may be that we have to address that later as part of the local plan when it comes back to us and looking at that in terms of policy. But I'm also very concerned that that there was an application here last time for somebody to have a dormer at the front, and this is clearly a dormer at the front. It might be recessed by 10 centimetres, and you might use semantics to say it's on the side, but it's at the side right at the front. And therefore, I think this is breaches PCS 23 in terms of design, and therefore I think I would say that we should reject it.
Thank you. I think Kieran might have some advice for us.
Right. This is an application for a change of use. The officers have been quite clear that it is within permitted development, so it's not a right that you have the power to take away from the landowner. They can build this side dormer, and there's nothing the committee can do to stop that. So PCS 23 is not engaged, it's simply a change of use. Well, it is engaged, but not on the topic of development of a dormer.
In which case, then, can I propose refusal on the basis that the communal area, well, it's that the communal area is not of the size that, and because of the mean design of it, that to meet the needs of people, even though they've got larger than 10 metre square bedrooms. And I know it's saying that the bedroom's got to be different size, but I'm sure Kieran knows the wording.
Okay, well, we haven't got a seconder yet.
Councillor, it sounds like you're saying although the room sizes meet your policy, you still find them to be mean.
Only the communal space is mean and small, and if it was a decent size, I wouldn't have a problem because that's the rule. But it is small and mean.
Okay, we also have 3 microphones on at the moment, so if we can try to remember to turn the microphones off when we're not speaking. Thank you very much. Councillor Smythe.
I was just wanting to check, and I'm backtracking just slightly with questions, that this is an 8-person house. It couldn't be any more, because in fact the bedrooms here are quite generous, and that's why our policy does allow what Councillor Vernon-Jackson is referring to as a mean combined living space. And I'd therefore like to move the officer's recommendation. I just wanted to check that we've got the bicycle storage is shown on this one. So as long as we can be sure that it is limited to 8 people and they're not going to cram the bedrooms, I'd like to move the officer recommendation.
Simon, would you like to?
It is an application for 8 persons. Shall I come back on the rooms and so on? Or, yeah. Thank you. So the combined living space is 25.1 square metres, which exceeds the 22.5 required by your policy. That is because the 22.5 square metres figure is provided because each of the bedrooms is above 10 square metres. And all of the bedrooms, bar 1, are well beyond the 10 square metres, up to 17, 16, 13, 15, as you've seen previously on the plans. You know, large front, it's a good-sized property with bay windows, etc., etc. So even with the en-suites inserted into all the bedrooms, most of them remain a very good size, and they're all way above the minimum standards. So I think it is a good standard of occupation and beyond, fully in compliance with your guidance.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Well, we have 2 motions in front of us. Anybody interested in seconding either of them? Councillor Vallely?
I think the officers are correct on this one, and I approve.
Okay, thank you. Members, any further comments or thoughts? Councillor Candlish.
Chair, I was struck by a few things that were said in both the delegation and also in the deputation. From the representation of the officer's report and from the delegation. I fear that our position is such that we are going to be unable to reject this application for grounds of the construction, because the government's policies on permitted rights, whether we think they are right or, as I might think, that they are often wrong, we have taken the view that we need to follow those unless there are compelling reasons otherwise. The thing that I worry about more with this application is the insight around the size of the proposal and the number of other large similar ones in the immediate area. So the deputation raised an issue of there being I think it was a 15 or 18 person block just around the corner and another smaller one. So the total number of people on that very small corner of the road is going to be very high, and given the likelihood of more vehicles, etc., I think that is going to be an exceptional problem that is related to this location and not to others. So for those reasons, I'm going to support Councillor Jackson's suggestion to reject, because I think there is an overwhelming amenity overload in this particular spot.
Thank you. So we have two motions. Peter, if I ask you to turn your microphone on. Thank you. Anything else before we make some progress? Okay, well, the first motion we had was Councillor Vernon Jackson's.
Councillor Smythe's motion achieved a seconder first.
Thank you, yes. Thank you very much. So the first motion we should consider is to accept the officer's recommendations with the conditions attached to Councillor Smythe's motion. Those in favour, please indicate.
5 votes in favour.
Against.
And 3 against.
Objections.
Abstentions, you mean?
Did I say?
You said objections twice.
Objections.
That was 5 in favour, 3 against, no abstentions. So the motion passes and planning permission is granted in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Kieran. I think my invitation might be to the agent to maybe speak to Mr. Bass about maybe visiting one of your properties and having a look at the work you do elsewhere. Okay, thank you. Okay, Shadwell Road.
Round the corner.
Thank you. It is indeed nearby. An application at 29 Shadwell Road for a change of use of multiple occupation from a house of multiple occupation class C4 to a 7-person house in multiple occupation. We have a deputation from for the applicant, and I have some supplementary matters updates. I'll come to those in a second. Perhaps I'll just locate you, broadly speaking. So Shadwell Road runs east to west between Gladys Avenue and London Road in Hilsea Ward, just near North End Centre. This is an application towards the eastern end of Shadwell Road. Planning permission was granted at this committee in November for a change of use from the house from a C3 dwelling house to a flexible C3, C4 use. This application proposes to change it from the C4 use to a 7-person house of multiple occupation. There's the property north facing on Shadwell Road. It has, we understand, rear access from this link. I think it's Oriel to the south. There's a view of the terraced street, I think mostly terrace. And the application property itself. Right, I think I'll go to the SMAT if I may. Highways, with apologies, just a complete typo, that the incorrect highways comments were reported. So paragraph 3.2 in the report should be struck out, and what the highways officer said actually for this application were, and I paraphrase, there are bus stops and amenities in proximity. Given the addition of up to 3 bedrooms, there is the potential for increased instances of residents driving around hunting for a parking space. This is an issue of residential amenity for you to consider. Indeed, it is not a highway matter. The size of the development would not lead to a material impact on the function of the highway. Cycle storage should be secured. The officer response is not considered that the change of use would lead to a demonstrable increase in parking that could justify withholding planning consent. And we would propose to attach a cycle storage provision. Another clarification as well on the HMO numbers. Paragraph 5.6 addresses the matter. Just to be very clear, there are 4 existing HMOs within the 50-metre radius out of 70 properties, residential properties, which is 5.7%. This property would amount to a 5th HMO, which amounts to 7.1%, just for clarity. Right, so this application proposes Class C4 to 7-person. Development description in the SMAT. The applicant proposes a change of use from Class C4 HMO secured by the previous consent. However, that consent was not implemented in compliance with the approved plans, so the purported C4 use does not yet exist. This application was effectively anticipating the conversion having taken place in compliance with the plans and being occupied prior to the decision being taken. Not advisable to make an application in that manner. So the purported C4 use does not exist. So we're effectively saying this application is, the lawful use of the property is still C3. They have not correctly implemented their C3, C4 flexible consent. So the application must therefore be considered as a change of use from the still lawful Class C3 dwelling house. The applicant's error has no effect, however, on the consideration of the mixed and balanced community. I say no effect in that the 10% number is not breached by the proposal. 7.1% of the residential properties within that 50-metre radius would be HMOs below the threshold. Therefore, your policy deems that there will be a mixed and balanced community still. Unfortunately, the lion's share of the report, or half the report, is rendered redundant by the applicant's error. So that is effectively struck out from 5.10 to 6.2. But I return to the key points for a C3 to sui generis. The adequacy of living accommodation, that is considered properly and correctly in the officer report. I'll show you the plans in a moment. And so the use class of the existing property does not affect that matter. The effects on car parking and refuse collection are also considered not materially different whether the property were Class C3 or C4 presently, and moving to the proposed 7-person HMO occupation. So to be very clear, the published resolution should be struck out, and we propose a replacement recommendation that the planning permission be granted, subject to special area mitigation, including receipt of no objection from Natural England concerning that mitigation, a legal agreement, number 2, to secure that mitigation, and then number 3, conditions to address the implementation, the 3-year implementation period, the plan numbers, cycle storage, and water efficiency. So if I take you back to the presentation, just for completeness, well, here is the 50-metre radius at this eastern end of Shadwell Avenue, 70 residential properties, 4 HMOs. Currently, if approved, this application will be 7.1. There's the application property. I've shown you the site plan already. I believe that the various extensions at the rear have already taken place. These are labelled existing plans. They're not existing because it's been converted. Those are the previous plans of 6-12 months ago. It's one of those properties that would have had 3 bedrooms upstairs. And the previous elevations now, depending on the degree of change. Here's the current, these are proposed and existing floor plans because they've already done it. So we have a front bedroom with its own ensuite. A second bedroom with its own ensuite. And then the shared communal kitchen, living room, lounge. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms, each with an ensuite. And then in the extended roof, 2 more bedrooms with ensuites. Total of 7 bedrooms. And so with respect to the living conditions for the occupiers, each of the bedrooms all exceed the 10 square metres. Some are on the nose, others are very clear of it. The bigger rooms, up to 17 square metres, are the largest one. So the kitchen, dining, living room is required to be 22.5 metres. It's just under 32, so it is a very good size of accommodation there. So with respect to the numbers, the sizes of the rooms, as well as their configuration and light and outlook, officers are quite happy that the standard of accommodation offered for residents would be acceptable. Indeed, it's pretty much the same layout as approved by this committee in November, apart from the front room, which was shown as a living room, is now converted to a bedroom with an ensuite. So, notwithstanding the mistakes made with the application, nevertheless, the recommendation is quite clear. It complies with policy with respect to a mixed and balanced community. The standard of accommodation is perfectly satisfactory, and officers don't believe there are any other reasons to withhold consent with respect to waste or bike parking, vehicle parking, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hill, 6 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to deputise on this property. I take on board the planning officer's comments with regards to the property's occupation as an HMO or not. Ultimately, the owner of the property has furnished the property. We do have tenancy agreements in place for them, which are legally binding for tenants to move into the property. The rent has been paid and deposits have been paid. So technically, those tenancies, whilst they haven't started, they are in place, which is what we were moving forwards with, as it being occupied as a C4 dwelling house rather than as a C3. But as you've heard, it doesn't make a material difference to the recommendation. Just to very quickly pick up on Councillor Vernon Jackson's points earlier, a quick search of the planning database for Portsmouth will show you that there are currently 4,322 HMOs in the city. That number hasn't changed materially over the last 12 months. What has happened, as we're all aware, is that interest rates have risen significantly, and as such, a very significant number of landlords are selling their properties. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it depends how you look at it, that does include HMO landlords, particularly of the significantly smaller properties. So whilst the number may well not have changed significantly, it's quite probable that actually some of the old, less suitable HMOs that were, for example, 3-bedroom flats that were never really designed to be HMOs, were non-en-suite, were aesthetically horrendous, those have been sold and turned back into family homes or properties for young professionals. Whereas a lot of purpose-converted HMOs have come into play. So, to quickly address the numbers in Shadwell Road and the surrounding area, you're very correct that we do target those particular roads to be HMOs because of the size of them, but Mr. Turner's absolutely correct that when we look at a particular road, for example North End Avenue, I own a property at the other end of North End Avenue that I know is already at 9%, so should I wish to convert my property into an HMO, it's a family house at the moment, I cannot do so. because it would be over because of the number of houses in Gladys Avenue, whereas the other end at number 2 or number 4, as we heard, there is the capacity to do so. The point is, these houses are 5 or 6 metres wide, and therefore, actually, in terms of the number of houses in that road, to get to a 50-metre radius is only roughly 10 houses. So just looking at it, there's only 5 HMOs in Shadwell Road, numbers 13, 15, they're very clearly down one end, 34, which is probably a third of the way along, 84, which is 2/3, and then 112, which is right at the end. So there's capacity at all of those areas of Shadwell Road because of the spread of the houses. Similarly, in Oriel Road, there's 5 HMOs, in Ophir Road, there's 3, and in Wadham Road, there's 4, which is the 4 roads on a bounce that you're speaking about. Most of those roads have a capacity, or have over 100 houses in the road, which means that actually all of those are less, even if it was on a road-by-road basis rather than 50-metre radius basis, you'd be looking at the fact that you could have double the number of houses in those roads as HMOs than there currently are because of the number of HMOs that there are in play at the moment. But I would urge you to look at that because, for example, if we go into Southsea, in Hudson Road, there's 55 HMOs, but there's only 100 in the road. That's because of the grandfather rights from November 2011, where existing HMOs were allowed to become HMOs. So the 4,300, which is less than 5% of the 120,000 houses in the city, does include areas where there's 70 or 80% HMOs close to the university. So companies like myself and also Applecore are looking to convert the better quality, bigger houses like Shadwell Road into HMOs that are far more suitable than the flat-fronted, very small, 3-bedroom, undersized houses near the university. But yes, if you play the figures, then it depends which way you cut it. Anyway, we've upgraded all the drainage in this house. We have a waste carrier's licence to remove all of the waste. All of the room sizes are well above what they need to be. We could have done a larger extension on this house to make it an 8-bedroom, but we've chosen not to. The majority of the works have now been completed. Only minor works to change the last bedroom. The property has been converted using permitted development, so we haven't needed planning for any of the works, only for the occupation. And the property is going to be professionally managed by an ALA registered agency, so there shouldn't be any issues in terms of maintenance or management moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members? Questions? Councillor Smythe.
I've got a question about the plans. If you could put them up, I'd be very grateful. Incidentally, while we're on this subject, I find it really difficult to read these plans. If we could have them larger and darker. I mean, I only resort to glasses occasionally, but my lighting at home isn't very good. You just simply can't see this. It's too light. But that's something of separate consideration. On the proposed second floor, I realise it doesn't make a significant difference to the calculations, but I am interested to know, and I hope that the roof space, which is under height, except for the very middle bit, is that part of that room, or has it been effectively wasted space? I understand we can't count it as habitable anyway.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, apologies, you didn't hear they're a little bit small.
And light.
And light, is it? Yep, okay. We could turn the lights off if need be. The 1.5 height is marked on the plan across here. Perhaps I'll wait for the lights for a moment.
The point is, it looks like it's a wall, but I just hoped it wasn't, because there's a lot of space, although it's substandard, that could be used.
Thank you. So that dotted line along there, and that says 1.5 metres. So the measured size of the room excludes the small area below 1.5 metres height. And the measured area is 13.5. So you've got 13.58 square metres. The requirement is 10. And then you've got, as it happens, a little area beyond that of just slightly reduced head height. Sort of height, isn't it? Chest height.
That is my question. It looks as if there's a wall built right the way across there. Is that the case? In which case it's a waste of potential storage or whatever. Just
I think they're probably, it's hard to tell comparing the section. Yes, sorry, I can see it now. Yes, there's an area of roof effectively. If I can.
But then you're also closing off a window to the room, which is in the...
So I think that's the 1.5 metre high wall. So you're talking about this space.
Yes, why has it been...
Yeah.
Why is it
Well,
wasted?
it becomes...
I know it's not habitable.
Yeah. Well, I think people in their lofts can decide, or in the roof spaces, they can decide whether or not they have it disappearing down to ground level and you have your shoes in there, or lower something, or you box it off like this and perhaps have a little door and you can go in, duck in and use it for storage. So, but either way, Councillor, it's not necessary because the room is big enough.
I do understand that,
Yeah.
but I hope it won't be fenced off because it's valuable space regardless of it. Whether it's, now I can't see the plans here. I just thought it was a waste of space. If you wanted to put a suitcase in it and so forth, or you wanted to put a desk against it and then sit in the area where you can stand up, I can't see why it would be blocked off. But it doesn't affect the planning permission. I grant. That was the purpose of the question. I mean, when we come on to comments, I'll come back.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Is that all are they all the lights? I think we have some more. Thank you. I don't think...
Back to that point, where is the window in that room as shown, if that is a blocked off wall?
Just about make out there are the 3 roof lights at the front, which are in the room.
Roof lights, okay.
Yeah, and they're low enough to be able to open and be able to see out. This sort of chest height.
So the window that's actually onto the road there isn't a window, okay.
Aren't they're higher than chest height, aren't they? So they've got to be higher than chest height. How high?
Chair, we have an expert at the rear of the room who wants to tell us.
I know.
That, okay, it depends how tall you are. They're clearly going to meet building regulations in terms of safety. I think they're around about 1.5, 1.6 metres, something like that.
Very quickly, the answer is you have to have a minimum of 75% of the floor area over a certain height. And the point is, if we were to make the room bigger, then ultimately we wouldn't meet that standard. So yes, it's a complete waste of space, but it's only to comply with planning.
I won't take any more time, but you can have sub-height space in a room if you're not counting it as habitable space. That's the point.
Indeed. Okay, comments? I shall move the officer's recommendation for unconditional planning permission. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Happy to second that.
Yeah, thank you.
To be really clear on this item, members, you're actually moving the supplementary matters recommendation, not the officer's report. Yeah, that's an important point for this.
No, thank you. Thank you. Judy?
I mean, just to add to that comment, I second that, but this is a different application because it does have quite a large kitchen, dining, living room, despite the fact that the bedrooms are very near to the regulation 10 metres squared. So I think it is acceptable.
Not mean. Not mean. Okay, is there anything else? Okay, members, those in favour, please indicate. Against? Abstentions? Thank you. Okay.
The motion passes with 7 votes in favour, none against and 1 abstention. Planning permission is granted in accordance with the Supplementary Matters report as it supplements the officer's report.
Thank you, Kieran. Derby Road?
Thank you, Chairman. Planning application at 43 Derby Road, change of use from a 6-bed, 6-person house in multiple occupation to an 8-bed, 8-person house in multiple occupation. So in other words, this is a Class C4 to sui generis HMO. So this is the sort of application where each on their own merits, but officers tend to conclude that in this case an occupancy increase of 2 persons does not require planning permission, and that's the recommendation in front of you, but members tend to take a vote on that matter first, and then if they decide it does require planning permission, move on to assessing the merits of the proposal. Derby Road is in Nelson Ward, so we're just a little bit west of London Road. London Road is off to the east here. If you know it, behind the Lidl and Iceland end of it. It's a one-way street. You can just see the arrows on the road heading west to Stamshaw Road, just to locate you. We're one property end from the end, and we have a rear access to provide easier access into the backyard and for cycle storage. That's the application property, second from the end with a small front forecourt. There's the one-way street heading off west towards Stamshaw Road. With respect to the mixed and balanced community matter of principle, the 50-metre radius has 59 properties, 4 of which are HMOs, including the application premises, because it is already an HMO, a small C4 HMO. And the number of the HMO percentage resulting remains below the 10% policy threshold, as it happens, but since it is already in use as an HMO, either way, exceeding or not exceeding the threshold, there is no change from the existing because it is already an HMO. With respect to the adequacy of living accommodation provided, the existing has a traditional Victorian pattern with the main body of the house and the rear wing, quite a long rear wing in this instance, with 3 bedrooms upstairs, 3 bedrooms upstairs and a bathroom and another smaller room. Apologies, 4 bedrooms upstairs and there's a smaller bedroom there as well. That's the 4th one, and then the bathroom. In terms of the accommodation provided, there would be repurposing of the internal space and permitted development roof extension provided. So we would have 2 bedrooms on the ground floor, each with their own ensuite, and then a communal area at the rear. The 4 bedrooms at first floor, so the bathroom has been incorporated into that bedroom. They each have an ensuite, and then the 2 in the roof with their ensuites as well. As set out in the report, each of the bedrooms exceeds quite comfortably the 10 square metres the requirement. The communal living space is also a good size. It's at 34 square metres, whilst 22.5 is the minimum requirement. So both, and as it happens, so not only does it meet size standards, but officers conclude that the disposition and layout of the rooms and light and outlook are all acceptable. So there's no objection there from officers. There were no objections or letters of support from any local residents. Then I've just got two minor typos with apologies. Paragraph 511, line 3 states there's an increase in occupation of one resident. Actually, it is 2 extra residents, to clarify. It's 2 elsewhere in the report. And paragraph 513, line 6 states the provision of additional bed space occupation. That should read the provision of 2 additional bed spaces of occupation. So just for clarity there. So no objection from officers. It's already an HMO, so there's no issue with the mixed and balanced community. The standard of accommodation is more than adequate. So the recommendation is that planning permission actually isn't required because it's a change of 2 occupiers, but happily to discuss that matter with you.
Thank you. Okay.
This particular property was an existing HMO when purchased and has been for over 10 years. The property is in a very poor state and does not provide great living conditions for occupants. Our client will be significantly upgrading this property and ensuring the property is future managed properly. In my opinion, this existing HMO is a prime example of the type of HMO in this city we should all be looking to improve, and the client I represent today shares that view. All bedrooms meet or exceed 10 square metres. The bedrooms range from 11.1 to 15.5. As you all know, the required communal area for 7 persons when all bedrooms meet this 10 square metres is 22.5. In this case, the property provides 34.24 of floor area, which is significantly in excess of requirement. All of the bedrooms benefit from an ensuite, and an additional WC is provided at the ground floor level for the comfort of the residents. This property also benefits from rear access to enable residents to easily access a secure cycle storage within the rear garden. There's been a bit of talk over the 10% density in the city and the amount of HMOs, and this has been put in place by PCC to protect the northern parts of the city from the situation the residents of Southsea find themselves in prior to the Article 4 direction. I totally agree this should be in place, and there should be a limit to the HMOs to ensure mixed and balanced communities remain. And as Simon rightfully points out earlier, there will be a point at which that is reached. However, currently there is still a need for HMOs in this city, and that's demonstrated by the ease at which these are let. I wanted to pick up on Councillor Vernon Jackson's mean comment on the communal area. So the 25 square metres previously provided on the previous application is 2.5 square metres larger than the size required by PCC. I speak to different tenants all the time, and every tenant have slightly different requirements as to what they're looking for in a property. Some prefer to use their rooms for longer periods, and some prefer larger rooms in which they spend more time in their bedrooms and less time in the communal areas. Whereas there are some tenants that look for larger social spaces, as they much prefer to be around other people and utilise those spaces more. So I do think it's important to offer a mixed type of property so that there's choice for tenants out there, which is why some of the communal spaces will be closer to the standard, providing much larger bedrooms, and some of the properties we design, as you see, will be like this one, have much larger communal areas, but the rooms wouldn't be quite as large as the last one. I just wanted to explain that to committee today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Members, questions, comments? Councillor Van Jackson.
The first thing I think we need to do is to decide whether we need to do
this.
This requires planning permission, so well, I have some words for you.
Well, do we? Yes, do we?
So shall I give you my reasoning for where I think we need planning permission?
Okay.
The application site is in an area of terraced housing where there is already significant pressure on parking and litter, and the increase in occupancy will, in all likelihood, lead to increased pressure on parking, litter, potential for antisocial behaviour, and is therefore considered as development and therefore requires planning permission.
Thank you. Members, do we believe this application requires planning permission on that basis? Those in favour, please indicate. Thank you.
It's unanimous. Members agree that it requires planning permission.
Thank you, Kieran. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you. This application seems to sit within the policies set by the City Council. Therefore, I'm happy to propose that we grant planning permission. As with the conditions as normal, as set down in the report. Well, actually, no, they aren't set down in the report.
It's unconditional.
But the usual conditions in terms of time, the bird tax, and whatever else there is. Simon, what are your normal conditions?
Thank you. Yes. We can check on bike storage as well. Water efficiency, we can check on the plans, as you say, the time period for implementation, and then the legal agreement for SPA mitigation, Special Protection Areas mitigation.
Special protection, that's the bird tax.
That is a recreational pressure on birds and nitrates.
Okay. So, seconded, Councillor
Seconded.
Vallely, I think you've got it. Okay, members, is there anything else? Okay, those in favour, please indicate.
Sorry, is that Councillor Vallely seconding?
Vallely.
Vallely. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Almost. We are voting. Those in favour? Against? Abstentions? I think I said that right that time. Thank you very much.
So planning permission is granted on a conditional basis.
Home Heights?
Should we forgot to mention 25 Tottenham Road at the start, I think, did we?
No, sorry,
Yeah.
yes, indeed. So the more observant amongst us will have noticed we're one application down. So, Simon?
Yeah, apologies, we meant to say this at the start and forgot in case anyone was here, especially for 25 Tottenham Road. If I take you straight to the Supplementary Matters report, achieving sufficient shared kitchen dining space for the proposed increase. This is an application for small HMO to a large HMO, increase of 2 persons. But if I take you back to the SMAT, achieving a sufficient shared kitchen dining space for the proposed increase in occupation of 2 persons requires in part the ground floor side extension shown in the plans, which I can show in a minute if you'd like. The applicant considered that to be permitted development, but it transpires post-publication that it is not. The side extension requires planning consent, but it has not been advertised as such nor assessed as such by any party, and so the application cannot currently proceed to decision. The application must therefore be withdrawn from the agenda, and the local planning authority will advise the applicant, and the applicant will make his or her choices on how the matter may proceed. But obviously, should the application be kept live and amended or supplemented in some way, and it needs to come back to committee, that of course would happen.
Thank you. Okay. Home Heights.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at Home Heights House, which is on Clarence Parade on the seafront in Southsea. It is for the rooftop installation of 3 pole-mounted antenna, 1 dish, 2 cabinets, and associated ancillary development. So we're on the seafront. Is the Naval Memorial, Clarence Parade up to the west, Southsea Castle down to the east. Away to the east is Southsea Common. We've got the Queen's Hotel, and Home Heights is the building next to it. I'll show you a photograph in a moment. So there's the Queen's Hotel, which is the listed building, and here is the application site. We're in the Owens Conservation Area, and then immediately to the south is the Seafront Conservation Area and Southsea Common, which is a historic registered park. And then lots of heritage assets within the conservation areas, the Queen's Hotel, which is Grade 2 listed, Clifton Terrace, Grade 2 listed, the Naval War Memorial, Grade 1 listed, and various other such heritage features in the area. This is Home Heights. Consented in 1985.
I feel like I've always wanted order.
So it's a prominent building on the seafront due to its height and location and separation from other buildings, and it's of its age in terms of architecture and appearance. The elevations are, I think it's easy to look at the photographs. Really, you get a feel. The building is complex in form. It's not one rectilinear shape. For example, it's got different heights of roofs and so on, which you read in different ways as you go around the building. And you can there's the front elevation, but you can see different elements. But the top element is where the equipment is proposed, which is towards the southern half, the front, so-called, of the site. So that is the main part of the roof, if I may say, and that is the overrun for the lifts, which you can not see in that drawing, but we'll see in others' photograph. Right. Forgive the red colour. I mean, it makes it look worse. We'll see some photo montages in a moment, but we have three, basically, antennae, 1, 2, 3. They're 2 meters in height each and mounted on supports that would take the total height to 5 meters. And then there's one dish as well, it's hard to see in these images, that's 0.6 in diameter. And they are sited, there's a closer image, there's the dish, for example. So this is the view from the south. You'd have to go a long way away to see all three, way across onto the common. So it depends, of course, where you stand. We'll show you some more images shortly. That's a helpful image. So this is the south elevation, and you can't make them out, but there are 3 antennae on the 3 corners. Here, southeast, southwest, and northwest, and they all point in those directions. So this points towards the northwest, more or less, towards the southwest, towards the southeast, and the dish is in that area. The equipment cabins are here, quite well hidden by the parapet. This shows a little more detail. This is sort of the ladder structure for engineering, maintenance reasons, installation. There are the 2 meter tall antennae. There's a person of slightly less than 2 meters height, the parapet wall. There they are in form, so they're slightly wider, about half a metre wide, and 0.2 metres, 20 centimetres deep, and the 2 metres tall. If I can just take you back for a moment, the reason for the application is increased capacity and coverage, principally for 5G. So everyone, or nearly everyone, lives their lives, or a significant part of their lives and businesses are operated requiring telecommunications, be they at home or business or on the move. And in this area, there is a lack of 5G coverage and capacity, and also in terms of capacity on the seafront when there are lots of people, at the Victorious Festival opposite this, or on a nice day in the summer or winter where there are thousands of people on the seafront wishing to use for one reason or another their mobile phone, for example. So there is I've got a coverage map later on. So that is the reason for increased capacity and coverage needed in this area. The applicant has tried to find where that will be best accommodated, and over the years we've seen different sites proposed, and when they're ground-based masts, a phone mast, a monopole, they can be very difficult to achieve in sensitive areas like this, sensitive open areas on the seafront, and we've said no to some that you wouldn't have seen at application stage, for example. So the applicant has I think, correctly considered a building, not a historic building, affected by heritage assets nearby, listed buildings, and in a conservation area next to the park that's listed, but nevertheless on a not a heritage asset itself. So that's the reason for the application, and as per the report, the government gives a strong amount of emphasis and support for the communications industry because, as I said earlier, everyone lives and works through that facility. these days. Of course, heritage and amenity are still matters for consideration that we've set out in the report. So there's the view from approaching from the west. So you've got, you're coming from Old Portsmouth, you're along Dewsburg Way. There's the western elevation of the Queen's Hotel, listed building. Here is the western elevation of Home Heights. So there are, you can see just about the third one on the southeast corner, and here are the two on the western side. And the dish on that one, that's the overrun of the lifts, and the cabinets are just sort of tucked in there behind the parapet wall. So this is one view. If I go back several slides, from the north and northeast, you might get the odd glimpse of Home Heights, but probably within the streets and so on, you will struggle to be able to see it. So the main views of the application site are in an arc from the southeast across to the southwest and west. And even there, although the main body of Southsea Common is open and devoid of trees, in this part there are lots of trees along the paths and so on, and so you would struggle to get clear views of it, depending where you are. As you approach, the angle of view becomes steeper, and you probably wouldn't even look up or notice equipment on the top once you're within a certain sort of distance of the building. But there are nevertheless open views. If I skip through again, so you've just seen that west elevation. Here we are standing by the Naval War Memorial with the sea to our back, looking more or less due north to Home Heights. Well, you may not be able to see it, it's hard. Let's see if I can zoom in a bit. There you are. You can just about make out the three antennae sitting on top of the building. But that is a zoomed in image, I hasten to add. This is looking south along, I think it's Ashburton Road, the roads that run north-south off Osborne Road. So we're looking south towards the sea. Again, you can get a view from here, of course. That's the existing north elevation. And you can just about make out how they might appear, coloured light grey against a blue or white or grey sky. So the report does identify some harm. We haven't sought to pretend there's no harm. There is some harm in a conservation area with heritage assets from the installation, but we conclude that it is limited harm. We've discussed this and assessed it carefully with the conservation officer. Limited harm on this particular building, and considering the views and so on. Limited equipment at height, and even in this street view, you know, you're not mostly going to be looking along the street, and you've got all the other activity of people and cars and architecture that you're mostly concentrating on, depending where you are. And they're fairly lightweight structures, so they would be seen. There would be limited harm, but in officer's opinion, that is outweighed, that limited harm, by the benefits of achieving improved telecommunications for wider society, individuals, families, business, etc., leisure, and avoiding the pressure on a ground-based mast or some other less appropriate position. So that is the conclusion officers have come to. Just very quickly, this is the current 5G coverage. It's hard for you to read the plan, but basically that's Dewsburg Way heading west. So you can see the gap in yellow to the west, for example. This is zoomed out a bit more. So there's the seafront following there, Southsea Castle, and even towards the southeast, because there is, as I said, one antenna faces northwest, one southwest, one southeast, which is to cover capacity and coverage along other parts of the seafront, as well as residents. If I may take you just to the supplementary matters report. There's one clarification on the first point. There was an objection point about disruption from the installation and maintenance of the equipment. The officer report states that is not a material consideration, planning consideration. I'd like to qualify that statement, saying the impact of the noise and any disruption of the installation and maintenance could, in theory, amount to a material planning consideration. However, given the scale and scope of the work, which would be short-lived in terms of installation and any maintenance, and would not be overly significant, it's not considered to warrant refusal of the application or indeed the imposition of a controlling condition. You may have noticed in the report Home Heights was approved as a elderly person's flats with Warden's Flats. So we just wish to clarify our consideration of the application with respect to age being a protected characteristic of the Equality Act 2010. So it falls to the local planning authority to have due regard to its public sector equality duty in the context of this application. In particular, but without limitation, the local planning authority must consider taking any steps to meet the needs of the elderly that are different needs to those without the protected characteristic of advanced age, and to remove or minimise any disadvantages suffered by the elderly that are not suffered by others. In that respect, it is not necessarily contended nor accepted that any noise or other impact would be worse for the elderly than other groups. Noting the representations and considering the application in the round, it is not considered that the development would unduly affect residents of the building by virtue of their protected characteristics in terms of loss of amenity through such factors such as outlook, noise and health. While there may be some noise, of course, during the development, even if the impact was felt differently by the elderly compared to others without the protected characteristic, the proposal entails a relatively short period of work involving minor noise disturbance that is not capable of meaningful or proportionate mitigation. Then, following publication, we received an objection from the Queen's Hotel, which is next door, concerned about views from the Queen's Hotel, impact on heritage and conservation area. It is a listed building and it is a conservation area, and concern about further additions of equipment down the line. The officer response, as I've just said, it's in the conservation area, the hotel and the application site, and the hotel's a listed building. These aspects are already considered in the officer report. This was assessed as part of the assessments carried out by the conservation officer and case officers when considering the impact of the proposal on the setting of the Queen's Hotel. Views from buildings are not typically material planning considerations, but outlook may be, and the setting of a listed building is. The hotel is located to the northwest, and the proposed rooftop equipment will be subject to angled and oblique views from that hotel, and given views in height, differences in height as well. The equipment itself is relatively modest in scale and would not be considered to result in any significant change in the outlook from the Queen's Hotel for any short stay visitors, as opposed to permanent residents, nor significantly affect the setting of the listed building. I don't think we addressed the point of further additions. Further additions, were they to be proposed, were this application to be approved first, would be assessed on their own merits should and if an application be made. And lastly, for completeness, as it's a legislative area in terms of heritage, we've referred to the MPPF in the report, but we should also note that we've assessed in accordance with the Planning Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990, particularly sections 66 and 72, which require the authority to have special regard to the desirability of preserving the listed building or its setting and any features of special architectural or historic interest which it possesses, and that special attention shall be paid to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character or appearance of that conservation area, respectively. The report has identified some harm, categorised its level, limited, and balanced this against the public benefits of the proposal. Less than significant harm is identified, and that is outweighed by the public benefits of increased mobile connectivity. Chairman.
Thank you. No deputations. Councillor Smythe, questions?
I'm afraid I can't quite read the map. It would appear, if I'm reading the map rightly, possibly, that I might have an interest in that I will be a recipient of 3G signals from this. 5G,
the coverage map. Yeah.
And do I have to, with a 5G, and do I have to declare an interest, therefore?
So it's, I mean, anybody on that network by walking past couldn't they? But are you specifically concerned about coverage at your home address?
Yes. But
I view that as pretty de minimis in these circumstances.
So do I,
I think you could, call it a personal interest, but I don't think it's a prejudicial one. No.
No, nor do I. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
For the record, I'm in exactly the same position and took the de minimis perspective. So I might be just about affected, but I don't think it's worthwhile.
And me too, sorry.
Possibly me.
I do drive past it occasionally.
No, I'm Spartacus. Anybody else? Okay, all right. Okay, any questions on the application? No comments?
my only comment is, could the mast be pulled in closer to the, as Simon mentioned it, the lift up run, so that it wouldn't be so, or would that affect the coverage? It might just, you know, if you've already got that collateral there, you might, if you brought the mass in, you might mass in closer to that mass, it might take away from just poking up like, you know, 2 odd ears sort of thing on the outside of the building.
Thank you. I think that would start to interfere with coverage because of the parapet wall, and as coverage is quite low down on the common and so on, it needs to be a certain height. And I'm pretty sure that the operators don't like to spend the extra money required on, you know, increasingly high structures that wind load and so on. So I think that would cause some reception problems.
I was concerned when I saw on the first photograph that they were black, but they're not, they're grey, is that right? Light grey?
Light grey, and
Much
we have a
better,
condition to that effect.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Shah.
Small point. Number one, 3 antennas. Why 3 antennas? I don't know because I'm not technical. Number 2 is if they won't stick out, then obviously that's the best option we can go for. Obviously the alternative is even worse. So I don't have any problem with that because this is technology, we can't stop it.
Thank you, Councillor. To answer your question, yeah, as I pointed out, they haven't got an antenna I propose on each of the 4 corners of the building because to the northeast coverage is and capacity is better there already. So, and the antennae have a certain arc, so they face forward and have whatever the arc is. So that's why they need 3 to cover the area of coverage and capacity they need to improve.
Okay, I shall move the officers' report the conditions attached.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Vallely. I think we're all. Were you going to add to no? Okay. All right. Is there anything else from anybody? Okay. Those in favour, please indicate. Against? Abstentions?
That was 7 votes in favour, none opposing and 1 abstention. So the Planning Permission is granted in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Kieran, and thank you everybody for today. That concludes our business, and I am closing the meeting at 12:30. Thank you.